Hello, everyone. Welcome to another The Intel with Greg Cosell, presented by Inside the Birds. I'm Geoff Mosher from Inside the Birds, alongside my Inside the Birds co-host, Adam Caplan. And with us is the man, Greg Cosell, for the third installment of his Intel. In this episode, we're going to talk about NFL free agent pass rushers. We have done wide receivers and linebackers. We've done corners and safeties. So if you want to hear Greg's breakdowns of all those positions, you can go to our YouTube and podcast platforms and hear those. But we are going to focus on a real prime position for the Eagles throughout their history, and that's pass rushers. But Greg, thanks for being with us again today. I want to sort of start off with, as we've done in the last two, with a discussion of scheme, because last year we saw Jonathan Gannon do something differently than we've seen in this city for years, and that's kind of playing multiple fronts and a lot of 5-1, 5-2 fronts with a linebacker brought, Jannard Avery usually, brought to the line of scrimmage. Now, Jannard would come off on nickel, and they would look a little bit more traditional when they did that. But theoretically, if the Eagles wanted a type of player who could do what Jannard did but stay on the field for nickel and also cover and do other things on third down or rush the passer, can you give me some comps, some guys who are playing in the NFL right now who are the best at doing that, so we can get an idea of what kind of player we're talking about?
You mean if they want that guy?
If they wanted that guy, yeah. I'm not saying they do, but we know that they do want to play multiple fronts, so a guy who would fit that.
I mean, if you look at the free agent list, I mean,
no, you don't. You can even just give me, just for our listeners, right, who aren't used to this kind of player. Just get, like we've talked about Anthony Barr. He's played that role before, but I wanted somebody a little bit younger who you would say is some of the best at this in the NFL.
Any player.
I'm trying to think of guys who are asked to do that, because that's not necessarily done a lot.
Yeah, it's a specialized position. Sure.
Kyle Van Noy is asked to do that with the Patriots. He plays on the ball. And at times will rush the quarterback, but he's also a coverage player. I'm trying to look at the teams here just, to see.
Does Tremaine Edmonds from the Bills do that, Greg?
No, not even close. He's a stack
okay. I thought he would. All right.
Not even close. I would say that Harold Landry at times does that for Tennessee. I guess he is a free agent.
He is.
He does that because Harold Landry at times – actually, because Tennessee played two different fronts in their base. They played, a 5-2 front where he was on the ball, but they also played a 4-3 front where he was off the ball as either a stacked backer or kind of an overhang player. So Landry has experience with that. Certainly Hassan Reddick has had experience with that, although I think the consensus would probably be that he's a better player when he's on the ball, because obviously they tried him as an off-the-ball linebacker in Arizona and ultimately decided he was best when he was on the ball. So I'm just looking at other teams.
So can I ask a question on Landry?
Sure.
How much, when you watch him, is he in coverage, or does he have a multiple role? Do they ask him to do a bunch of things with the Titans?
Well, in their base, there were times he would be in coverage when they would go, obviously, to their true nickel or dime in pass rush situations. Adam, he would be a pass rusher. He was rarely in coverage when they were in their nickel or dime in a passing down situation. But he did play as a stack backer or an overhang linebacker in base when it was more of a normal down and distance situation at times. Obviously not every snap.
Yep.
When you look at Harold Landry or Hassan Reddick, and we talk about their ability to rush the passer, but also playing that position, sometimes they just have to drop, right, and cover the comeback, the curl, or patrol the flats. Are either of those two guys proficient or good enough to improve the Eagles' defense from that standpoint?
Well, you probably, Geoff, wouldn't want to have those guys do that very often. I mean, they're both really pass rushers. Landry is look, ever since he came out of BC, he's a pass rusher. It's just obviously different coordinators do different things at times, but that's not Landry's game. You wouldn't be, let's put it this way, he's a free agent. If you're looking to sign Harold Landry, you're looking to sign him because he can rush the quarterback. So that doesn't mean you would never line up in a defense where he becomes an underneath zone defender at times, but you're not signing him to be an underneath zone defender, nor would you be signing Hassan Reddick for the same reason.
Right.
In fact, talking to the Panthers, they don't ask him to be in coverage, like unless it would have to be a certain circumstance.
No, it's a rarity. It's a rarity.
Correct. Yeah, he is. You ever see when Bill Cowher says to Greg Lloyd, "Rush the passer"?
Oh, sure. That's a famous NFL film's bite.
That's the way it was explained to me by someone of the Panthers is that they kind of knew what they were getting. Obviously, Matt Rule coached him at Temple. Just rush the quarterback, and his pursuit. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but his explosion. Greg, I guess would look pretty darn good on tape.
Yeah, I mean, look, no coordinator, Geoff, as you well know, you've been doing this a long time, is going to just line up and do the same thing every play. So obviously you do different things, but ultimately if you sign a player like Landry or Reddick, you're signing them to rush the quarterback. The other is just a change up.
Right. So Landry had 12 sacks last year. I mean, he's been
Landry had a good year.
Landry had 25. What do you like about him in general?
Landry is a true edge pass rusher. He's got a lot of bend. He's got a lot of flexibility. He's explosive off the ball. No, Landry is a good pass rusher. Now, he played on a really good D line that had other players that you had to be concerned about, particularly two interior players when they went to their their dime. They would bring. Well, of course, Jeffrey Simmons is always a D tackle, but Autry, who's a really good player, very overlooked player by media, but well known in the league. Autry would move inside in their dime with Simmons, and so he had other good players on their front. But Landry is your classic edge rusher who can bend and close to the quarterback. He's a good, that's what he was coming out of college. That's what people thought he'd be in the NFL.
Greg, I want to talk about a player that has been on a bunch of teams, and we've had a lot of questions about him. We know that their fans are not who are Eagle fans, so they're going to want to know about this guy if this guy went to their team. But Emanuel Ogbah puts up numbers. He's a good football player, but what does the tape show you about this guy?
Yeah, he's a tough guy for me, Adam. Not because he's not a good player. He's put up better numbers than I personally think he's a pass rusher. Does that make sense?
Got it.
Yes.
I mean, he's strong. I think he plays with really good hands, heavy hands. I think he understands leverage. He's not. I would not call him explosive, and nor is he bendy. But he's a heavy hand guy. I'm surprised he's put up the sacks, but he's done so. Now, he's been with Miami the last number of years. They're a highly schemed defense with a high percentage of blitz. So he's also part of a particular style of defense. I guess what I'm saying, maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. It's happened once or twice before. And then, then I sat down and I realized I made a mistake. No, just kidding. So anyway, but I don't see him as a true edge rusher. Like if you're thinking, here's a guy you're going to line up in a wide 9 and he's going to be that guy. I don't think he's that guy.
Because that would probably play into what you just said, why that he's been on his 4th team and could be on his 5th team. Browns, Chiefs, Dolphins.
I think he's a certain kind of player that fits schematically, and you have to understand what his specific traits are. And those traits are good, what those traits are. But, if you're going to go into your nickel or dime, and let's say you have Sweat on one side as your wide 9, I don't think Ogbah's the wide 9 guy. In fact, in that, I almost think you play him inside.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that, Greg, because, we bring you on the show because we value your tape study, your hours of it. And I watched some Ogbah just wondering if the Eagles would have interest in him. And I came away with the same thing. They blitz heavily, and a lot of his sacks that I noticed kind of came when the pressure funneled the quarterback near him, and he does a nice job. As you mentioned, he does have good power, and he was able to kind of – look, I'm not taking away from him. I didn't think he generated sacks with his own great spin move or hand move or anything like that.
When you look at sacks, there's a couple things. You got to look at the 5-yard metrics, really important. There's a lot of guys who get sacks because of just the way the play develops. And, guys can get 9 or 10 sacks that way. And then someone sees a number on a page and they go, wow, he's a great pass rusher. So you have to look at the 5-yard metric. Does the guy have great burst off the ball, which he does not? Okay. And then there's rushers versus kind of pursuers. And Ogbah's kind of part of a defense that is highly schemed, multiple fronts than the Eagles. They get a lot of players involved up on the ball at the line of scrimmage, including safeties, which you don't see the Eagles do very often. So he's part of a scheme and a system that allows him to put up some numbers. His strength is that he's heavy-handed, strong hands, and powerful, but he's not a bendy, flexible edge rusher.
Great. Good stuff. Really good stuff. Let's talk about some other guys. I mean, Adam, we can. I don't see the Eagles being in on a big money, long-term deal. They have treated this position in free agency lately with veterans on short-term deals, whether going back to Chris Long, to Michael Bennett, to bringing back Vinny Curry. I mean, they really do look for veterans here. So we could. We're not gonna. I can't imagine Von Miller is going to be a guy who the Eagles are going to pursue because he's going to get a lot of money.
Yeah, he's older and he's still a really good player, but if he's asking for big dollars at his age, I don't think the Eagles would go in that direction.
Yep. Right. Even
Adam,
Yannick
agree with that?
Ngakoue, right?
Yeah. Well, Ngakoue is under contract, but the reason why he's on this list is I know in the past they've had an interest in actually pretty significant a couple of years ago.
But he'd have to be a trade.
Right. Well, actually, they have a decision to make on his contract, the Raiders. Some of his money becomes fully guaranteed on the 5th day of the league year. So, and remember, this is a staff, Greg. I know we got Raider fans listening. So they're probably going to play a hybrid, right? The Raiders, because and obviously it's Graham.
Well, they have Patrick Graham now.
Right.
So their defense is going to look different than it did under Gus Bradley.
Right. So does Ngakoue fit? A hybrid type of. He played it in Maryland, didn't he?
Well, Ngakoue is an edge rusher,
right?
I mean,
right.
That's his game. You don't want Ngakoue inside of offensive tackles,
right?
Ngakoue he's an athletic edge rusher. I mean, that's what he is. You don't want, like, to me, you don't want Ngakoue playing what they did with Josh Sweat. That's not, to me, what Ngakoue is.
He wouldn't fit anyway. Okay, so if the Raiders. So he wouldn't fit in with the Eagles if the Raiders decide to move on without him, but he definitely is an edge rusher, though.
He's an edge rusher
where he could just, get after it. Okay.
Right.
So back on the theme, if the Eagles were to sign a veteran edge rusher like a Harold Landry or trying to think of another name.
Landry's younger. He's only been through one contract.
Correct. But does that change? He's obviously going to be on the field for rushing the passer, even on third down. Does that change the alignment that they would use either Sweat or Graham in, or do you think that he just takes the spot of Brandon Graham and you have, say, Josh Sweat and Harold Landry, hypothetically, as spread out edge rushers?
Well, Landry did play significant snaps as a stacked linebacker in Tennessee's base because Tennessee was a combination 5-2 or 4-3 in their base. So Landry did play significant snaps off the ball in their base as a stacked linebacker. So the question is, and again, you may know more than I do because I'm so focused, now I'm just watching tape and I'm not talking, I haven't talked to the Eagles about this, obviously, but I don't know how they would see Landry if, for instance, if they wanted to make some tweaks and adjustments. Every coach does it in off season. As you guys said, maybe they'll do similar things that they did a year ago, or it'll be part of their package, that 5-man front. But if they, let's say, decide, you know what, we're going to go a little more, some more snaps of a more 4-3 kind of look, Landry can do that.
Okay.
When you go to your nickel or dime, you want him on the ground rushing the quarterback. He's not going to be a linebacker off the ball when they go to their nickel or dime. But you can line him up as a stack backer if you choose to play a 4-3 base.
Interesting. I mean, that makes him, I would think, more appealing because of that versatility there. How about Charles Harris, who played last year on Detroit and seemed to
had a good year, by the way.
Yeah,
believe it or not, there's every year there's like 2 or 3 teams that don't have good records that I end up seeing a lot of just because of who they play. It's one of those things. And I actually saw a lot of Detroit, and Charles Harris had a really good season. Now, Charles Harris was in the same draft with Derek Barnett.
Right.
And I actually liked Charles Harris coming out more than I liked Derek Barnett. I guess I've been proven somewhat wrong, although Barnett's not been great. But Harris has sort of made the rounds. Detroit's what, Adam? His third team?
Well, yeah, Miami, Atlanta, and Detroit, correct.
Yeah. And I really liked him coming out of Missouri, and I thought that he was going to be a really good pass rusher in the NFL, and it hasn't happened, although he had moments this year in Detroit. I will tell you that. He had moments. He's got pass rush tools. I don't know why it didn't work in the other places. You never know that, particularly when a guy does have traits. I'm not there every day. I can't speak to work ethic. I can't speak to ability to assimilate information and understand. I don't know any of that. But the guy has traits, and he had a good year this year. So if he's the same age, essentially, as Barnett, I would assume, Adam, he would not be a big money guy, would he?
No. But what happens?
I mean, he's a pass rusher, so sometimes they get big money.
Right. But no, he's a mid-level free agent. No question. No, I'm with you on that one.
I mean, Geoff, I guess my feeling on Harris would be, depending on your allocation of resources to this position, if you're going after a free agent, if you're not looking to really break the bank on a guy, if you're not going after Von Miller, which I doubt they would be, and you are thinking mid-level free agent, that's the kind of dollars you have allocated for free agency for that. I think Charles Harris would be a really good guy to bring in. He's coming off his best NFL season where he played his most snaps, and I thought he played well.
Right. I mean, the conversation you would think for Howie has to be, look, I paid Derek Barnett $10 million last year on a 1-year deal. So am I going to bring Derek Barnett back at anything close to $10 million a year, or try to get Harris, who's probably going to be on a lower price tag, and maybe you spread it out over 2 years? I don't know. But
and I would argue based on tape that Harris had a better year.
Do you think he's, because his traits sort of fits the new Jonathan Gannon defense more so than Derek Barnett does? Like, can Charles drop into coverage a little bit if need be?
I mean, I think anybody can drop into coverage if need be.
Sure, but I mean, does he have the experience to get it done? Yeah.
Same point. You're not you're not signing Charles Harris to drop into coverage. Or will there be snaps in a game where, yes, you do that because it's a change up and maybe you're blitzing from the other side and sure, of course, but you wouldn't be signing him to drop into coverage.
Okay. So the bigger point is you just like him more at this point than Derek Barnett.
Well, based on tape, based on tape, yeah. Like makes it seem like it's like a personal thing.
No. I know you're not writing.
And I think people who listen know that if you say it's not because gee, I like Charles Harris, I want to hang out with him. I think the tape from Charles. I think Harris's tape in 2021 was better than Barnett's.
Got it,
Greg. So you said you've seen some guys, but not maybe the best teams in the world, and a guy that is a super sleeper for free agency is Jacob Martin, who Temple fans might remember. Started his career with Seattle, and he got traded to the Texans. And he's very, very quietly put up some numbers, Greg. I don't know how much you've seen of him, but I know
have seen him.
Yeah, so give us an idea of what he looks like.
I have seen him, and it's funny you say that because Houston is another team that I saw a lot of their defense. Because remember, we talked about Justin Reed last week. Yeah. Houston's another team that I've actually seen a decent amount of. I think he's actually a pretty intriguing guy. Again, he may not be exactly what you want. He's a 6th round pick of Seattle, as I recall. But he always seems to show up when I watch tape. Like I said, he's probably another mid-level guy. He's not going to get a ton of money. He's probably in the Charles Harris range. He's an intriguing guy to me. I think he's he showed up in Seattle. He showed up in Houston. He's obviously not a full-time player, but he's an intriguing guy. I think Jacob Martin he's a guy when I first started noticing him, I had to look him up because I really didn't know much about him.
All right, Greg, I'm going to throw two veterans at you, and you let me know if you think they fit the Eagles scheme, if they've got something left in the tank, if you like what you saw last year on their tape. One being Jason Pierre-Paul, and the other being, I wrote the name down, Justin Houston.
Well, Houston, I don't have a great recollection of, so let's leave him out for the moment. Jason Pierre-Paul got hurt a bit last year, missed some games.
Older. Yep.
He's older.
Yep.
I mean, obviously at his best, he's everything you want because he's long, he's athletic, he's bendy. You know, he just looks the part of a pass rusher. But is he 30? He's probably 30, isn't he?
30. He must be 30.
He was even a little older than that.
Yeah.
Because he came out in the same draft as Brandon Graham, if I'm not mistaken, right?
He might have been a year younger than him, but you're right.
33. He's actually 33.
I'd be careful about him coming off injuries. You know, to me, he's a one-year deal guy for any team, not just the Eagles.
Yeah.
And I'd be careful about that just because there's now a little bit of an injury history there.
He had a significant shoulder injury. I think he had to play with a torn labrum.
Yeah.
And it somehow
he fought through the season, and I'd be careful about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, Chandler Jones, he's a free agent.
Yeah. Yep.
Boy, he's still a good player. I mean, you know, again, he's going to command money because
he's right. But
he's a really good player. But I mean, he's, you know,
how do they use him? How do they use him, Greg? How do they line him up?
Oh, well, Arizona was kind of multiple front based, so he can do a lot of different things. Because don't forget, he's bigger and weighs more. I mean, he's a 270 plus pound guy. He's not a 240 pound edge rusher. So you can line him up inside of an offensive tackle in certain fronts. But again, you're signing him as an edge rusher, but he can be more multiple in his usage and deployment just because of his size, his length, and his weight.
One more sleeper.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say one more sleeper, but actually finish off. Do you have something you wanted to add to that on Chandler Jones?
Geoff was going to jump in there.
Yeah, go ahead, Chandler Jones.
No, I was just going to ask about some different. I was just going to ask about some different guys, but if you've got something, Adam, go ahead. A sleeper.
Actually, my one more sleeper, Uchenna Nwosu, is such a good football player. No one really talks about him. He gets sort of lost a little bit, Greg, but he puts up numbers. I know you see them a lot. What do you think about Nwosu?
Yeah, I think he's a pretty solid player. You know, I remember him coming out of USC. I thought he had traits to rush the quarterback. You know, he's still a first contract guy, isn't he?
Yeah, he's just finished. Yeah, he's done. Yeah, he's up.
Yeah,
contract's up.
So he's young. You know, he's another one of those guys that I would bet he'd be viewed at a slightly higher level than, let's say, the Charles Harrises or the Jacob Martins. In terms of what he's going to get money-wise at him. Obviously, that's your area more than mine, but that would be my sense. I would think that people would see him as an ascending guy, whereas I think Harris and Martin, while they're both solid, I think people would see them as this is what they are, and they're pretty good at what they are, whereas I think Nwosu would be considered a guy that maybe with more snaps, maybe, you know, depending on greater usage, whatever, that he could still be an ascending player.
You know, I think the Brandon Graham coming back at 33, 34 is interesting, Greg, just because, you know, I said the Eagles' history recently is to get themselves a veteran pass rusher, but they kind of have one coming back in Brandon.
Yeah,
so normally I would look at this list and I would see Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison and say, hey, maybe that's a guy. But that's what Brandon sort of just from an age and what he gives you standpoint,
right?
Yes,
he did tear his Achilles. Yeah,
that's it. You know, again, we all love Brandon Graham. That's not the point. This is not personal. He's a great guy, you know, but that's a tough injury to come back from for any position, but for a pass rusher that needs to push off and change direction. You know, there's no guarantee that he's back. Right. When I say back, I mean he's going to be back, but there's no guarantee he's anywhere near the player he was. That's a big question mark.
With the Eagles having so many picks and very likely to pick some type of pass rusher early, it feels like this time around they may hunt for a second contract guy, but not the biggest money second contract guy out there who, I don't know who that would be at this moment because some of these guys are really
Charles Harris makes sense for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My guess is Landry is going to get big money.
Big. He's the top of the market. Yeah.
He's a first contract guy coming up off a big year. Yeah. Actually, off 2 good years. I mean, he fits the profile of what teams look for in a pass rusher.
He's
going to get money.
He would be on the level of not quite what Byron Jones was, which is above market, but Landry's going to get a market deal. Like if the market is $16 million a year, that's what he's going to get because if you graded available pass rushers, he's the guy. of the younger group, and but he's a good football player. I mean, he puts up numbers, and you just broke it down for us earlier here. He actually would fit, as you said, what some of Gannon does. That's interesting.
Without question, he would. But I mean, so then again, I don't know what I don't know what their plan is as far as free agency spending. That's what I don't know.
Sure.
Obviously
they have a lot of cap space.
They do or they don't.
They do. No, they have a ton of cap space.
Oh, well, so they may say, hey, because Landry is a young player. I mean, Landry's probably 25. I mean, he's a young player. So, if they want to allocate meaningful resources, because like I said, they certainly know Brandon Graham's situation better than I do because he's, they know him. But I would be, it wouldn't surprise me if Graham could not play the way he's played before. That's just really a heart injury,
Yeah, he is 25, by the way, Harold Landry.
Yeah, 26 in June. Yeah,
26 in June. Yeah. So I know we talked about him in our linebacker preview, but for anybody who hasn't seen it yet and wants us to ask about him because he does play has played multiple positions. We've talked about Anthony Barr before. What was his tape like this past year for the Viking? What can he do best at this point in his career?
Well, again, you have to get into how he was used in Minnesota. Anthony Barr was not used as a pure pass rusher in Minnesota. Right. He rushed the quarterback at times, but that's not what he was in Minnesota. Anthony Barr in Minnesota was essentially an off-the-ball linebacker. Now, when they went to certain nickel defenses, he would line up. They did a lot of those double mug fronts. He'd be in the A-gap with Kendricks. Every once in a while, he would rush off the edge. But Anthony Barr, in terms of snaps, I don't know what PFF would say in terms of snaps, but just from tape, he's really a linebacker, off the ball player than an on the ball player. Now, could he do what Avery did this year? Certainly, he certainly could. But and Avery certainly rushed the quarterback at times this year. And if you want Barr for that role, that's fine. He probably could execute that role. But you're dealing with a guy coming off some injuries in recent years, over 30, or certainly right around there. Isn't he about that?
He turns
30
late this season.
So looking at, I think it was 31 or 32. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, again,
I'm sorry. No, he'll be 30 next year. Yeah, he's actually not as old as I thought. Right.
So it seems like he's been around a long time.
I know.
He does.
Older than that.
But I mean, he's had some injuries.
Yep.
But he's a good player. It's just how do they decide they want to use him? If they sign him, he's probably Avery for them. It's that would strike me as his role.
Greg, when he came out of UCLA, wasn't he a much better pass rusher? Wasn't he an upside guy?
When he came out of UCLA, the feeling was, Adam, that he was going to be an edge pass rusher.
Yeah.
And then Minnesota drafted him, and they made him basically a stack backer. So that surprised a lot of people. And he's had a good career, but he hasn't been used anywhere near exclusively as an edge pass rusher. That's not what he's been.
Isn't he the guy that will be on the tight end a lot, if I recall correctly?
At times.
Yeah.
Interesting. Even at 29, you wonder if he gets to a different system and is used differently if there's plenty of gas left in the tank for the skill set that he had.
He may be rejuvenated if you tell him he's going to rush the quarterback, because that was his number one positive trait coming out of UCLA. Pretty much everybody thought he'd enter the league as a pass rusher.
Right. Well, that's great stuff. I think we've broken down as many pass rushers, edge specifically, pass rushers, as the Eagles get ready for free agency.
You don't think they're going after Jadeveon Clowney?
I don't suspect they will go after Jadeveon Clowney. Do you guys have any kind of strong opinion on that?
We've talked about him before, Greg. What did he look like? You've broken down him many times on our show. I know that you've been honest about it. You just go by what you see on tape. Did he at least show that he had something left last season?
I thought he had a really good year last year. Okay. I mean, I think that Clowney is not a pure edge player, but he does have plays where he can rush the quarterback from the edge, but he's not a pure edge player. He's at his best rushing the quarterback inside, and teams have found that out. So when they go to their sub fronts, he often, not 100%, but he often moves inside. But I thought he had a good year rushing the quarterback from the edge. Didn't have a ton of sacks. I think he ended up with 9. I don't think he's ever had a double-digit sack season, but I thought this past year he was around the quarterback a lot. Like I said, he might have been his best year as a quote unquote pass rusher, but most teams he's been on have found out that he's really more effective in your sub fronts when you move him inside. That's where he really helps your defense the most.
All right. Well, he was on the Eagles' radar, about a year or two ago, Adam? So I guess we can't just completely dismiss the idea, but we will see.
Well, he was the one
happens.
who hit Wentz when he was with Seattle, right?
Yeah,
that's
cheap
correct.
shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So we've gone through the gamut of free agents. Next week, free agency begins. The legal tampering window starts, Monday, right? So we may push back our next edition of the Intel with Greg Cosell a little later so that we can have Greg analyze the signings that were made. So we'll see how things go. We'll see how news comes out. But we will have another episode next week of the Intel with Greg Cosell, and we will try to have it wrapping up or recapping a bunch of signings made by the Eagles and other NFL teams. So we look forward to talking to everybody again next week. We thank Greg Cosell, as we always do. For Adam Caplan and Greg Cosell, I'm Geoff Mosher. You've been watching the Intel with Greg Cosell.